Now we're ready to go over the principal parts for each of the me type verbs. And again, just like ditto me, the same rules and forms are gonna for each me type verb is gonna look like what we did with ditto me for its principal parts. So let's start off though with the less quirky of the me verbs, and that's the epsilon types. We'll find that there for łistημι, the alpha type me verbs, there's some quirky things that go on in the form. So we're gonna go to łistημι a little bit later. Let's start off with tιθημι. And again, the most important thing about the me verbs, the secret to knowing the me verb well, besides knowing the 5 basic rules, is to make sure you memorize the principal parts. It's absolutely essential for every verb that you memorize the principal parts, not just for the me verb, because the principal parts tell you what the stem looks like if there are changes in the stem. And so we already did all the forms for the present active indicative. And I'm going to have you take the time to do the imperfect forms. And so, so here is tιθημι. And again, for the imperfect forms, it's going to build itself off of the present stem, so you can expect iota reduplication. The suffix endings are, for the first person singular, nu, then sigma, nothing, men, te, nu. It's going to have the augment. And then it's going to have the iota reduplication. Wow, I'm actually doing most of it for you. And then the big question then is what does the internal vowel look like for the stem? And for the first person singular forms, it does go long, but in a slightly different way. While it's tιθημι with an eta for the first person singular forms, it just so happens that for the second person singular forms, it's also the, but it uses instead the diphthong. So to say I was placing is tιθέν, but to say you were placing is tιθές with the epsilon iota diphthong, and to say he, she, it was placing is tιθέ with a diphthong. But just like for all the plural forms, the internal stem stays a short vowel. And this has a just like the deuteronomy, it has a modified third person plural suffix. So its forms is tιθέμεν, tιθέτε, tιθέσαν for the plural forms. Now, we just went over the hardest part of the me verb. I'll let you go ahead and fill out the future. It's going to be they all the way down, and you just use the sigma, and then you add the normal, what you expect at the active suffix ending. So they say, so they so is I will place, they say you will place, you do the rest. For the aorist form, again, it uses the kappa aorist, so and it uses this theta as its stem change. So you have the epsilon, you have the theta, and then for the second person singular, it's ethekos, and then you can do the rest. For the perfect, it has reduplication, but it's the epsilon reduplication because that's what you use for the perfect tense. Notice the internal vowel is the diphthong. So it's theka and thekos for the second person singular. So you can do the rest. Tιθημι, you can do the my, psi, tai, etc. Case endings, the reduplication, the diphthong as the vowel change. And so it's tιθέσαι, and I'll let you do the rest. And then here is the aorist passive, and it uses the short vowel, and if you use that short vowel stem all the way down and follow those same rules for the aorist passive as you would with ḍiḍimi or luo, you'll be just fine. So I really want you to try to practice this on your own because we already went over ḍiḍimi thoroughly. This is tιθημι resembles ḍiḍimi as well as the other mi type verbs. This is actually good practice for you. So you go ahead and do this on your own. So I'll pause, and then go on to the next slide. Here are the principal parts for the alpha mi verbs. And again, we're using łιστημι as our paradigmatic verb for the alphas. And so again, as part of your vocabulary, you have to memorize the principal parts so you know what stem to use for each of the tenses. And once you do that, the rest is easy. Follow the rules that you know for ḍiḍimi or luo for all the tenses except for the present where it has special rules, and it's except for the aorist where sometimes the kappa aorist being used. Now with łistημι is probably the most quirkiest. Is quirkiest a word? Okay, well, it's the quirkiest of the mi verbs. It has some weird things happening with it. So just a couple of notes and then I want you to fill out the rest of the paradigm. One is remember that the iota reduplication uses the rough breathing mark in place of the sigma. The sigma drops, the rough breathing mark takes its place, and that iota there is the reduplication. It wasn't really originally part of the stem. The alpha for the present tenses goes long in the singular forms. It goes short in the plural forms. And so you can go, we already did the present tense. I want you to go ahead and do the imperfect tenses for this column here. And then make sure you get that breathing mark correct. It's going to be very important for the rest of the other principal parts. For the future, there's a typo here. While sta is indeed the verbal root, like ḍiḍimi, the short vowels wants to go long, so it's actually an eta. So the stem here should be stay-so, where stay is in fact the stem that you use for the rest of the paradigm. So make sure you say stay-so, stay-say, stay-say, etc. And I want you to fill out the rest of the paradigm. For the aorist, the quirky thing about łistημι is that it actually has two aorist forms. Yes, two aorist forms, and you see both in the New Testament. It actually has uses a first aorist form and a second aorist form. You see both. And so both use the same internal vowel chain, so it uses the eta. Notice here that that's a smooth breathing mark. Why is that? Because this is an augment. It is not reduplication. Because it's an augment, that's a smooth breathing mark. Whereas with reduplication, like in łistημι, you have a rough breathing mark. And then you simply add, so you add the augment, have the stem with the long vowel, and then you just simply add, and notice here, it doesn't use the ka tense formative. And so this is not a misspelling. The ka tense formative is not used. The ka tense formative is used for other mi verbs, but for the alpha mi verbs, for whatever reasons, it wants to keep the sigma tense formative. So it's going to use, for the first aorist form, that sa, se, samen, sate, san form. So please use that. Or if you're going to use a second aorist form, it's going to use estain, estais, estay, estasemen, estasete, estasesan. Now, for the perfect tense, where's the reduplication? I want to show you something. Do you see that rough breathing mark there? There's a rough breathing mark in front of the epsilon. Where the augment has a smooth breathing mark, the perfect form has the rough breathing mark to signal that this is an epsilon reduplication that we would expect. And then it has the long vowel as part of its stem, and then it uses the same ka, kas, ke, kamen, kate, kan. So go ahead and fill this out. If you haven't done it already, please fill out the aorist forms on your own. For the perfect middle passive, it also uses the eta as part of its stem. You have that rough breathing mark to show its reduplication. It uses the typical endings my, psi, tai, methe, sithe, nuntai. And for the aorist passive, you have a smooth reading mark. Why? Because this epsilon here is not part of the reduplication. It is an augment from the aorist. And notice that it uses the short vowel. Again, something that we would expect. It looks pretty much like what dithymì does. You should it should be fairly easy to fill out the forms. So go ahead and use sta as your stem, and then use the augment, and then you already know the passive, aorist passive endings, thane, thes, they, etc. So go ahead and fill out the rest of the chart. Again, the entire chart here is filled out in its entirety at the end of the study guide, so you can double check your work, but I want you to do it on your own.